Welcome to Cloudify Podcast, brought to you by Cloud Advisory. On this podcast, we talk about ways to grow, innovate, and automate your business using the Salesforce customer experience platform. Without further ado, here is the next episode of Cloudify.
This is episode 10 of the Cloudify podcast, where we talk about how to grow, innovate, and automate your business using the Salesforce customer experience platform and related technologies. I'm your host, Michael, and today, on this episode of Cloudify, we're going to actually talk about a new book out from Aaron Ross and Jason Lemkin called From Impossible to Inevitable: How Hypergrowth Companies Create Predictable Revenue. This book asks and answers the question, why are you struggling to grow your business when everyone else seems to be crushing their goals? And you might ask, why are we reviewing this book on this episode of Cloudify? I think it's because we've been talking a lot about growth and innovation and automation. But what you need, I think, part of this when you're going to look at any sort of marketing automation or growing your business through inbound or outbound marketing and sales, is you really need to have kind of a methodology behind it. And I think that Aaron Ross, with his Predictable Revenue book from 2011, which has been called the Sales Bible of Silicon Valley, really kind of gave an excellent real-life blueprint for how to build both your inbound and outbound lead generation machines. So I think this is like an ideal book and probably an essential read for anyone that's looking at implementing a digital business strategy or a digital marketing strategy. This is really a must read in my mind. And with the latest book, From Impossible to Inevitable, he takes the predictable revenue methodology and extends it even further. So I think this is a worthwhile download, and I'm just going to kind of go through what I like about the book and what I think you can benefit from and give you a bit of a synopsis. So who is Aaron Ross? And really, Aaron Ross's claim to fame is that he built the first inside sales team at Salesforce. And I think the numbers were that there were about 150 employees at that time. So he was there pretty early, and he exited out and actually then built his own consulting and education business called Predictable Revenue. He's also a partner in Carburetor, which you can find at carb.io. And it's basically a pipeline automation platform, and it's where you can take the predictable revenue methodology and apply it using their software. He's also got a pretty prevalent, consistent email newsletter and other blog content. I've always found his stuff useful and informative, but it's always very personable, and that kind of can rub people a little bit the wrong way because he'll talk about really stuff that's unrelated to predictable revenue, like his family and his 12 kids. Yes, 12 kids. He's built quite the family in addition to building quite the business. Big-hearted guy for sure. I personally first purchased the book Predictable Revenue, and again, it was called, it's kind of been referred to as the Sales Bible of Silicon Valley. And I think at the time, there was all this information out there about how to, generate leads, and all of them were really based around the growth of Google PPC and people searching for keywords and finding information they want and conducting their own research online, which is a reality. And it really makes it kind of daunting if you're not getting organic SEO traffic and you're not able to buy enough keywords to get enough leads. How do you, grow your business without picking up the phone and calling someone? And in this age, no one picks up their phone because when they do, they know that generally it's someone on the other end that they don't know. Most communication is through email, and the reality is that cold calling is it was tough when it was in vogue, and today it's less and less relevant, or so I thought. And I think what Predictable Revenue did is it provided a blueprint for modern day inbound, which is, kind of more pull marketing, generating leads, and finding potential buyers or clients later in their buying cycle when they're ready to do something. When they find you through information, that's great, but what if they're not finding you? How do you proactively go out and make new relationships and try and build new customers. And I think where Aaron Ross with Predictable Revenue and now Impossible to Inevitable really hit the nail on the head was providing a modern framework for outbound marketing and lead generation. I had lingering questions in my own mind when I first saw that the new book was out. Maybe you do too. Should I sit there and churn out online content, which I do, and hope potential clients find me, which they don't always? Is there any point to being proactive? Is there any point to cold emailing or calling a company as my client, or is it just going to diminish my position in the market? Is it going to be fruitless? If I go out and hire a salesperson, the same question applies, and what do I direct them to do? Are they prospecting? Are they closing? Should I be implementing some sort of sales or marketing automation now? And what's the point if I'm not generating leads on a manual basis? So I think what this book provides is what works in 2016 and beyond to consistently add new clients and stand out amongst all the other chatter that's out there of competitors and options in the marketplace. And Impossible to Enable really outlines not only the predictable revenue methodology for business development, which does a few things. One, it says you should be able to generate both inbound and outbound leads, and here's how. And the second is that if you have enough leads, it's really going to overcome all other problems. So if you can figure out how to generate ongoing leads, then you're going to get enough deals and opportunities and revenue to grow. He also advocates that for your outbound team and your inbound team that you segment what people you hire, what sales reps are doing. So, he's been a big advocate of generating leads and having business development representatives follow up on those, and then having outbound prospectors and having those as two different roles, and then a third role being, more of the closer account executive type role. What I really liked about the new book, From Impossible to Inevitable, one, I think it details Aaron's own journey in more detail, talks specifically about how he went from working at a job at Salesforce to a freelancer, and then to going beyond being a freelancer to building a business with predictable revenue that he could grow. He parallels the journey, I think, of many people today who are opting for freelancing and then discovering that they've basically recreated their own job, obviously on their own terms, but they want to escape not only the corporate zombieism, but they also want to escape just, getting by as a freelancer. So they get to the point where they want to actually build a scalable business. And I think, there's so much information out there about inbound versus outbound sales, and inbound snobs, as he refers to it, kind of clued me in, which is, hey, this is not the only way. There is a way to do outbound and be proactive. And I found it kind of liberating reading the book. So if you have a business that you're trying to grow and automate, this is like a must read, I think, just for that reason alone. In Impossible to Inevitable, he also advocates how to nail your niche before you build your 3 types of lead generation practices. And I think that was really a pretty profound chapter in the book. Nailing your niche, allowing you to go narrow, be a big fish in a small pond. And he shows how that can actually be way more successful in trying to be all things to all people. Particularly, if you're in an agency type business, that's a really good example where, you're providing services and it's like, hey, we can do everything. But the most successful way to generate leads is to go really narrow and explain to a specific market what you can do for them different than anyone else. He provides some really great case studies in the book. The one that I really enjoyed was the story of Matt Epstein was the first VP of marketing for Zenefits, which is basically an HR software platform. Matt Epstein became somewhat famous, but was really not that successful prior to joining Zenefits, certainly not as a VP of marketing. But he was the Google Please Hire Me guy who created this funny video where, and I've included a link to it, where he kind of talks about all the reasons that Google should have hired him or should hire him for product marketing job. And then when he eventually talks about his journey to joining Zenefits under the promise of, hey, you might not get paid for a year, but you should join me anyway. And he did that. So he had the guts to do that. He showed guts where he spent kind of his last $3,000 on that campaign. And that's really what ended up leading the campaign of Google Please Hire Me. And while Google didn't hire him, it certainly got him noticed in the Valley, and he ended up getting the Zenefits gig. What I found was interesting about that was how he grinded it out for 30 days to prove that he could generate leads, sending just 100 cold emails a day and doing A/B testing. So he basically didn't implement any sort of complex technology, but using basically spreadsheets, he figured out what messages resonated with which audiences and what response rates he could expect. So after 30 days and sending about 3,000 emails, he had really a template that he could then scale up. It wasn't about the tools in that case, and that's why I think this is an excellent book for it. It kind of gives you those first steps where you implement any sort of marketing automation. We advocate building obviously a digital marketing strategy, and I think this kind of asks some important questions. It gives you a bit of a framework that you can help build out that strategy a little bit more. And then, it really shows that if you are in a business that's even 1 million or 5 million or 10 million, you can also get stuck in growth ruts, if you will. And it shows how you can get out of those ruts and still hypergrow your business. I really enjoyed Aaron's own niche story about how when he left the Salesforce job, he got kind of consulting, and he was kind of like going around through different options of how he positioned himself in the market. And he got some consulting and made, kind of that $5 to $7 a month, and he was stuck at that okay level. And then what really blew up his own business was when he specifically identified what his niche was and then marketed himself that way. And when he did that, that's when he saw a big increase over 4 years in his income. And he indicated it went from like 67,000 to 720,000, so almost like a tenfold increase. In that time, he also grew his family from 0 to 12 kids, as I mentioned before. So very big-hearted guy. And he only wanted to work 20, 30 hours a week, so he really needed to automate his business, so get his message out, implement his niche story, and then scale up the business while not scaling up the amount of time that he had to invest in it. He tried different niches, he indicated, from 2007. The forcing function of having so many kids in a big family kind of motivated him to figure out a different way. So what he had landed on was, of course, PredictableRevenue.com and the Predictable Revenue book in 2011. And what he ended up specializing in his niche was B2B. Companies were B2B with 1 million plus in sales. They need to grow, but they were not using outbound prospecting. And through Predictable Revenue, he showed a methodology that people would buy into, consulting and services, and of course, the book and other content that he produced. But they would buy into that so that he was the expert that they turned to help them grow outbound prospecting teams. His rates, as a result, because he specialized in just that one area, was very specific about what his niche was. He became the expert in that segment. He actually kind of created his own little segment, and that's the idea, I guess, he's advocating. And his rates went up, and his income grew, and of course, we know now that Predictable Revenue has grown quite a bit, and he's come out with Impossible to Inevitable as a follow-up, and then Carb.io is another business that he's become a partner in. So really, to kind of wrap it up, the conclusion is Impossible to Inevitable outlines 7 steps to hypergrowth for any company. I think it's supported well by current and recent stories, and it provided me with clarity around the level of effort required for different lead generation methods, and set what I think is realistic expectations of success and benchmarks for those 3 types of lead generation that are outlined in the book. Talks about how to segment your hires along their roles, as I indicated. So, not having a salesperson be all things, but have them focus on either being a prospector or someone that follows up with inbound leads, or someone that takes leads from prospectors and closes them. Talks about how to both measure and achieve realistic outcomes. I like the personable tone, and it's consistent with the theme of Impossible to Inevitable. It takes you through that journey mentally from where you might have questions in your mind to feeling more confident that you can implement this strategy and make it work for yourself, for your own business. I think it's an ideal guide to get beyond the questions of if you can grow and how you can grow. And I think it's a must read again before you implement or buy any form of marketing automation. So I highly recommend that you take a look at it on Amazon or on Aaron and Jason's website. Check out From Impossible to Inevitable. You can get it on Amazon, or you can go to fromimpossible.com, and I think that'll allow you to access the Amazon link. If you download From Impossible to Inevitable, let us know, and let us know your comments. I think it's a fantastic book, again, for all the reasons that I outlined before. Again, you can follow this link here and access it on Amazon, and you can buy it with one click. It's $11.99, well worth the $12 you're going to spend on it, in my opinion. I did, and so I highly recommend it for anyone else that's listening to Cloudify podcast. Thank you for joining. I hope you find this information useful as usual. Please check out this and our future episodes. Let us know ideas that you have for the podcast, and if you want to see any particular things reviewed, or if you would like to see any guests, because I think what I'd like to do is get beyond me talking, and let's start talking to some interesting people. Maybe we can convince Aaron Ross to jump on.
This has been an episode of Cloudify Podcast. Check out other episodes for interesting topics on how to grow, innovate, and automate your business using the Salesforce Customer Experience Platform.